Hi guys, Such Mobim here again. Welcome to another episode of Real Estate Expose with yours truly, Such Mobim. Now, in our discourse today, we are going to be talking about how you can actually lose your right of occupancy, on that particular land. Take a listen. This particular knowledge will help you or help someone that you actually know. We've been talking about the Land Use Act of 1978. Now, this is where we actually take our discourse a little bit deeper. So sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy it. Now, you can actually lose your rights of occupancy on a particular land. You know, it could be prompted from your own end or from the end of the government. I will explain. When it's coming from the end of the government, it means governments can actually revoke, or the governor can actually revoke this right of occupancy. For a number of reasons. Number one, if it's overriding public interest, that is to say, the governor, according to the Land Use Act of 1978, has the sole right to administer land, to give and take land. You understand? Not for himself, but for government purposes. Now, if the government has need for that particular land, they want to use it for a public, purpose. They want to use it to build hospital, they want to use it to build road, one thing or the other, and it happens to be that that's your land is within a particular area, they can actually revoke your right of ownership, occupancy in a particular land. The issue of compensation will come up later. I'm going to talk about this later. You understand? The government can also revoke your right of occupancy if you are being found wanting as a way of punishment. For instance, you bought a land, you know you are supposed to be paying rent on that particular land, and you're not paying the rent. All the taxes, fees accrued on that particular land, you're not paying. The government can, as a way of punishment, revoke that particular right of occupancy, and then you will still pay. You know, those fees. You'll be owing the government those fees as calculated from the day you started owning that land, up to the moment it was revoked. You understand? Now that is the aspect from the side of the government. You can lose your right of occupancy on your land from your own end by way of transferring the ownership you have on that land. Say for instance, you are selling the land, you lose your right of occupancy, of course. Debt is another way too. You lose your right of occupancy. Now let's talk about debt, really. If the owner of a land dies, what happens to that land and the rights on that particular land? In some cases, you'll be tempted to rush to say, okay, fine, this land, you now share it amongst the children and all. It doesn't just work that way. You say this land that used to belong to this man, let's now share it because the land is too big. Let's isolate it and then share it amongst the children. No, it doesn't work that way. When a landowner dies, even the issue of inheritance on that particular land is subject to whether or not that land has a non-customary law backing it up. I will explain this thing. What it means is this: if, say for instance, Mr. Okafor dies, or before death, Mr. Okafor has a land, and then he asks his lawyer to prepare a will for him. Now, if the will states that this particular land should be given out to this particular person specifically, now the will is actually an instrument or a non-customary law backing up that particular land. Now, in the absence of a will, it means that land will not be subject to the customary law of the deceased person. You understand what I'm saying? Now, what it means is this: Mr. Okafor owned this land before death. He did not will the land. He did not, will it. He did not have any will saying this land should be given to this person. You understand? So upon death, that land will be subject to the customary law of Mr. Okafor. So if the village people of Mr. Okafor shares their land by saying this one goes to the upper of the house, or the first son, or the first daughter, all those kind of things. So that is when that land will be subject to those kind of laws. You understand? And it's valid. Now, upon doing this, let's say you've transferred ownership by way of inheritance, or you're selling the land. You cannot do it completely or outrightly without the consent of the governor. You understand? So if you've done your inner or family agreement, you now go forward with some of the documents, the C of O and all. You go for, we call it certification, or you use deed registration, you understand, to back up the information of the CFO as is registered at the Ministries of Land. You understand that particular point? Now, so that is that about what happens when someone dies and how they do the transfer of ownership and all. Now, let's talk about compensation. Now, remember, initially we talked about how that government can actually initiate, the process of, you losing your right of occupancy. Now, in cases where they use the first injunction saying that this particular land over, the injunction of overriding public interest, when they revoke that particular right based on the fact that they want to use it for public purposes, if they do it this way, most times it comes with compensation. I will explain. Before I go further, I would just like to stress here that the government in question could be state or federal government. You understand? So now, what I mean is this: the federal government can have a need for a particular land, and they will need to go through the state government to revoke the rights of occupancy, especially and specifically for the purpose of public interest. You understand? They want to use it for building roads. They want to use it for building facilities, just for public purposes. You understand? They can revoke that right. And when they do it this way, it means most of the time it comes with compensation. Now let's talk about this compensation of the thing. There are just a few things that will qualify a landowner for compensation when the rights of that occupancy is being revoked. Number one, if that particular landowner is up to date with the rents, tax, and every other fees paid on that particular land. Now, if you are being checked out and said, okay, this landowner or land occupier, is up to date with the issue of rent and all the payments, and an officer, a public officer, is invited, a valuer actually, to cost all the things you've spent on that particular land in terms of the things the rents you've paid on that land from the first time you owned the land up to the moment it was revoked. They will now pay you back, maybe with interest. That is one. Number two, you can actually be given some sort of resettlement. This one happens most of the time when it involves, in a large number of people and large, land, amounts of land. You get, so it happens. The government acquires a particular settlement and then resettles the community or the inhabitants of that particular place. Now, this particular one involves government giving them land in a different area, and then in most cases, helping them rebuild the community, making facilities, buildings, as it were, in the former place they're coming from. You understand? Now, that is that about the compensation given to the owners of land in this particular regard. Now, it's important to note as well that there is a kind of checks and balance that is being done here. Most of the time, it has to be with individual resettlement. If at the end of the day, the government sets up a building or settlement for a particular community or individual, and then based on the valuation, they now saw that, okay, fine, we've invested more money to resettle these people. This happens on paper. We've invested more money in resettling these people. What it means is that they will now cost it what you used to have plus what we've set up for you. The difference, you are going to balance the government over time as a way of loan. You understand? It's more like in your former place, you used to have a bungalow, and in your new place, they now set up a duplex for you. You understand? So they will subtract it and then give it to you as a loan, which you are going to pay back to the government. When this really happens, you get. But that's actually what is on paper. You get. So another aspect of the compensation comes in when you make direct inputs or improvements on that particular land. I need to state this fact. Government does not pay for land. Government owns the land. They actually pay for your investments and expenses on that land. That's why I said earlier, the first condition for compensation is that you are up to date with your tax and all the free fees accrued on that particular land. That is one, which will be paid back to you. Two is when you've made any form of improvement on that land, physically or by way of business investment and all, any kind of improvement that is quantifiable. Of course, public officers, estate valuers will actually be employed to come and look around and then put all these things together and cost them, because they are quantifiable. So this is actually what the government is going to use to repay you, for your resettlement, for business, you've lost a way of revocation of that particular right of occupancy. You understand? So government does not pay for that land, they pay for the improvements made on the land. So they cost the building, if it has building, they cost it. If you have crop on the land, fine. If you have anything you've done on that particular land, that is actually what they're going to cost and pay back. They are not paying back for the money. They are not paying you the amount of money you bought the land. No. They're actually paying you on the improvements you've made on that particular land over time. So that is actually what the law states. The Land Use Act of 1978 states, practically, yes, on paper, actually. Of course, all these things, they have different interpretations, and there are a few, changes here and there. The law is like two-edged sword. You understand? So there are some injunctions to these things that happens every now and then. So you see, the government owns the land. All the other improvements made on the land are actually what are being paid and accounted for at the end of the day. So that is the status quo based on what the Land Use Act of 1978 states. At this point in time, I hope I've been able to enlighten you and not to confuse you about this particular topic, how you can end up losing the rights of occupancy on that particular land. Thank you and God bless you. If you have any question whatsoever you need me to cover, you need me to throw more light on, do well. I love engaging with my people. Do well, drop a comment in the section, send me a DM, reach me out on my number on the screen, and I'll be glad to follow you up. Thank you so much and bye for now. See you next time.